This song is called Love is a Healing. Love is a healing. Love is a healing. Love is a healing, healing us all. Love is a healing. Love is a healing. Love is a healing, healing us all. Throughout time, there's been pain and separation. Our understanding seems the only hope at all. So we turn inside to find our resources. A new beginning just waits for our call. Love is a healing. Love is a healing. Love is a healing, healing us all. Love is a healing. Love is a healing. Love is a healing, healing us all. In our minds, we often find the questions. One breeds another, and to that there's no end. But in our hearts we can always find the answers. Love is the source of our guidance within. Love is a healing. Love is a healing. Love is a healing, healing us all. Love is a healing. Love is a healing. Love is a healing, healing us all. Love is our wisdom. Love is our strength. Love is our peace and joy and understanding means. And through compassion, our resurrection. Love is fulfilling our destiny. Love is a healing. Love is a healing. Love is a healing, healing us all. Love is a healing. Love is a healing. Love is a healing, healing us all. Healing us all. Healing us all. Thank you.
Love is a healing, healing us all. An original song Dave wrote back in 1986 that is so pertinent still today. Would you give it up for this amazing Unity Band? Thank you so much for being here today. Welcome to each and every one of you. We like to begin our time together in that awareness of really what we are about. So would you join me in this, that we are radically inclusive, spiritually progressive, and socially responsive. With that, I invite you to join in an opening prayer. As we turn our awareness within this morning, we do so in the truth of that song that love is a healing. That healing takes place in that space where life affirms life. That affirming, unifying, healing presence is best known as love. And yet even that word love can reduce perhaps what it really means. Today we open to this presence that is bigger than any idea, but this presence that is life itself. We do so as we look through the life of an individual who is a spiritual teacher, a peacemaker, and how living out and growing in love has been an inspiration for many. We open to this today that we may be blessed, that we may be healed to be healers. We may be blessed to be the blessing. And for this sacred time of celebrating together, we are most grateful. Thank you, God, and so it is. I invite you to stand as you're able and join in our opening song. Around you. This means I want a holy handshake. This means I'm open for a hug. Where'd you come from? Here we go. Hallelujah, hallelujah, since I laid my burdens down. Glory, glory, hallelujah, since I laid my burdens down. Oh, glory, glory, hallelujah, since I laid my burdens down. Glory, glory, hallelujah, since I laid my burdens down. Since I laid my burdens down. Yeah. Lay my burdens down. This band was feeling it and rocking it to Don, Dave, Richard, Joel, and Pete, and to Kat. Would you show them our love and appreciation this morning? So we'd like to acknowledge anyone that may be here for the first time today. Do we have anyone that's a first-timer? Just to raise your hand. Wonderful, welcome. We take an opportunity, there's some over here as well. If you just raise your hand for just a moment until our welcoming team members will find you. They're giving you a connections card, and there's a red heart on this card. If you'd like to wear this heart, it will allow us to acknowledge you as a newcomer, and we can make ourselves more available if you have any questions. We'd also like to let all of you know there are packets of information outside of our bookstore, and you can pick up one of those if you'd like some more information. But most of all, we want you to know that you can always know that you have a sense of belonging here. Take an opportunity also to turn, if you would wave to those who are watching us live stream or those who will be watching us. We say welcome from wherever you may be joining us. How many countries, Donna, have we had? 8 to 9 different countries have tuned in so far, so give them a gratitude in the back here. So we're going to rub our hands together, and wherever you're live streaming, and especially to those of you that are right here, right today, we love you, we bless you, we appreciate you, and we behold the divinity in you. We thank you for being here. I'm going to invite Reverend Christy to come up to share some announcements. And if you look in your bulletin, there's an insert. I'm especially excited, so excited I can't get the words out, it seems. But the first Sunday in April, Tama Keeves is going to be with us. I'll be here. She'll be joining me. She's going to be with us, and then here for an afternoon workshop. But just in a nutshell, grew up in New York, Jewish. She's a Harvard graduate lawyer, practicing law, and began to have this breakthrough. She discovered what she didn't know at the time, but are very new thought principles that changed her life. Today, she's an inspiring author and speaker and teacher, and she's going to be here with us, and I think you'll be very moved by her story. She's been on Oprah. She's one of those type of folks that have that level of platform, but she's also the kind of person that when I called and asked if she would come here, she said, absolutely. I'd love to visit Asheville, North Carolina, so we're going to welcome her. Would you share the rest of these announcements? And I'd like to pause to welcome Reverend Christy and Reverend Laura, who are so instrumental in our team. Thank you.
Thank you, Reverend Darlene. Good morning, everyone. I have a few announcements, a couple without a slide. So first, we have these beautiful felt squares in a basket just outside of my office in the foyer. And what we are inviting you to do is to consider what community means and what this community means to you, and then decorate a square, return it. We're hoping to have them all collected by next Sunday, and then we're going to turn them into an amazing community quilt. And there are many ways to decorate, as you can see. Felt on felt, my favorite, glitter glue. Buttons, beautiful. Magic marker, my second favorite. Beautiful paints that you can paint on there your message and what community means to you. And you can return those squares to me. Thank you very much. And also, anyone who is a current member, We are going one more weekend, today and next Sunday, and for membership renewal, if you have not yet renewed your membership and would like to remain a member of Unity of the Blue Ridge, please stop at the table just outside the door here and complete this application, or this renewal form rather, and you're in for another year. And then, as you can see, it's quite obvious when you walk in, there are tables everywhere filled with wonderful items that are calling for a new home. So if you take a gander around everything on that table and something speaks to you and you would like to take that home, you can offer a cash donation, that supports our Unity Sustainability Team, which does their best to stay devoted to earth care and keeping this community green. So thank you for providing that repurpose event in our community. Next, I would like to say thank you for all the food donations. Interfaith Assistance Ministries will be picking that food up today, and we'll have a number of how many pounds of food that you have donated, and those go to serve and feed families in the Henderson County area. So thank you. I'm just going to give you a hand. Thank you for your care for our greater community. Also, next Sunday, we are having, as many of you know, our potlucks have been on hiatus, and we are having a fifth Sunday potluck. The last Sunday, it's a fifth Sunday, and that will be following our second service. So bring a covered dish to share, stay. Wonderful opportunity to get to know one another in community, break bread together. And if you would like to help in any way with that, that would be greatly appreciated. You can see me. I will point you in the right direction for that. And then again, as Reverend Darlene shared, Tama Keeves will be coming. She's also offering a workshop in the afternoon on the first Sunday in April, the 7th, and you can register for that online. Any questions? Please see me. With that, we are aware. I would like to introduce Reverend Laura Collins for our inspirational reading.
Thank you very much. So much going on. Today I'd like to share an inspirational reading from the Daily Word. It's not today's word, but it's from this month. And the word is relationships. I express peace, joy, and love in my relationships. Love is the only power in the universe. As the unconditional free flow of divine love surrounds, comforts, fulfills, and sustains me, I know that I am loved, now and always. All people are spiritual beings, created in the image and likeness of divine love. Whether or not we are aware of it, our very nature is love. I love myself just as I am. I want to add, without one plea. Some of you will know what I'm talking about. For there is no one in the world exactly like me. I am unique, spiritually whole, perfect, and complete. I love all that I am, for all that I am is spiritual substance. Today, I pause and remember the words of Jesus. You are the light of the world. From that root awareness, I lovingly allow the light in me to shine for all. Kindness comes naturally to me and flows effortlessly through me. I express my highest and best self. And from Matthew 5:14, you are the light of the world.
What if we, what if you, what if I all loved each other? There would be nothing we can do if we choose to love each other. There is no mountain could stand in our way if we are just love today. is love, and profit without faith just ain't enough, but still remains the same. And a world filled with war, despair, and hate, without a piece of food on every place. Could love be the right direction? There is no mountain could stand in our way if we are just love today. What if we, what if you, what if I all loved each other? There would be nothing we can do if we could choose to love each other. There is no mountain could stand in our way if we all choose love today. So many people fight civil wars, they can't recall what they're fighting for. Can love us all come together? If you and I could strive to understand and teach our children love for fellow man, there's no storm that we couldn't weather. There is no mountain could stand in our way if we all choose love today. What if we, what if you, what if I all loved each other? There is nothing we can do if we can choose to love one another. What if we, what if you, what if I all loved each other? There is nothing we can do if we can choose to love one another. Yeah.
Well said and well sung. We are so blessed every week to have our spirits elevated by this amazing music team. Would you give them a hand? Thank you. Thank you so much. What if we could just love each other? It sounds pretty easy. Have you tried living it out every day? It's a lifetime of practice that it is. This month, and actually leading through the end of April, I'm in a series. I've never done this series before, but I'm truly enjoying it, and I appreciate your feedback because many of you appear to be enjoying this, where we are looking at the lives of what I'm calling mystics, masters, and peacemakers, looking at individuals' lives and gaining insight through their life to give us insight into our lives. We're looking at what inspired them in order to be sources of inspiration for us. And what are some of the actions that they took? How did they get involved? And perhaps these are some practical things that we may want to try out. And so you may remember a few weeks ago I started with Gandhi. And then last Sunday we talked about Mother Teresa. And many of you said that you have been working with her idea of always do the next loving thing. To do the next loving thing. So this week I introduce you to the third individual, and I'd like to share some quotes with you before I tell you who the person is, and see if you know. This person, very steeped in scripture, talking about the Good Samaritan, the story of the Good Samaritan, said this: the first question which the priest and the Levite ask is if I stop and help this man, what will happen to me? But the Good Samaritan reversed the question. If I do not stop and help this man, what will happen to him? This person often prayed this prayer, use me, God. Show me how to take who I am, who I want to be, and what I can do, and use it for a purpose greater than myself. How many of you can identify with that prayer? That's very much, I've said before, my 3 favorite prayers are use me, guide me, thank you. And this speaks to me. Another thing they said was, now there is a final reason I think Jesus said love your enemies, and it is this, that love has within it a redemptive power, and there is a power there that eventually transforms individuals. He said, so let no man pull you so low as to hate him. That's a powerful teaching. He also said we must develop and maintain the capacity to forgive. He who is devoid of the power to forgive is devoid of the power to love. And then probably one of the most popular sayings, darkness cannot drive out darkness, only light can do that. Hate cannot drive out hate, only love can do that. And that life's most persistent and urgent question is, what are you doing for others? Anybody know who that is? Yeah, the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Probably his most famous was the I Have a Dream. And I hope that you'll learn some new things today. I have enjoyed this past week being steeped in the study of his life. I read many essays that he wrote. I went back and read his college papers, some from his book, and discovered some surprising things I did not know. And I hope you may discover some of those things as well in these next few minutes together. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., of course, was a minister and was known and is credited with being a great leader in the civil rights movement. But he always called it, first and foremost, a spiritual movement. And I appreciate that, because if we are to live out, do unto your neighbor as you would do unto yourself, if we are to live out, love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your being, and love your neighbor as yourself, then we must be about the cause of what we call sacred rights, which you could call them civil rights. They're really one and the same thing, and that's truly what he was about. Martin Luther King Jr. was born 90 years ago. If he were living this year, he would have turned 90 in January. And interestingly, though, the name on his birth certificate was not Martin Luther King Jr. The name on his birth certificate was Michael King. But his father, who was a Baptist minister, and through his work, the father traveled some around the world, and he learned about the reformer Martin Luther, and how he had been a Protestant responsible for some great reformation. And he was so inspired that Martin Luther King Jr.'s father took for himself and for his name, he changed both of their names from Michael King to Martin Luther King Sr. and Martin Luther King Jr. He also believed that in the Bible there's evidence that God changed people's names. Sarai became Sarah, Abram became Abraham, Saul became Paul, Jacob became Israel. People's names were changed because their name represented their nature. And so as a person's nature evolved, often their name would evolve. So he saw it fitting, and I think perhaps sort of a foreshadowing to the work that his son may do. But that's how he actually became Martin Luther King Jr. In some of his writing, in some of King's writings, he talked about how family and having a foundation of love was really the cornerstone of his life. It was the sustaining energy through his life. He wrote this. Martin Luther King Jr. said, "It is quite easy for me to think of God as love, mainly because I grew up in a family where love was central and where lovely relationships were ever present. It is quite easy for me to think of the universe as basically friendly, mainly because of my uplifting hereditary and environmental circumstances. And it is quite easy for me to lean more toward optimism than pessimism about human nature, mainly because of my childhood experiences. My mother instilled a sense of self-respect in all her children from the very beginning. My father instilled a sense of strength, determination, and self-confidence. My father was a sharecropper's son. He had met brutality firsthand. He said, the thing I admire most about my dad was his genuine Christian character, that he's a man of real integrity, deeply committed to moral and ethical principles. He is conscientious in all his undertakings. And so he really credited his parents, and in particular one of his grandmothers. When his grandmother died, he began to believe in reincarnation and life living on, and his parents didn't know what to make of that. But he had some beliefs that were very different than what he had been taught. He was a gifted student. When he was in high school, he was able to skip 2 years. So he entered college at the age of 15 years old. He would go to Morehouse College, where his father had gone, and he went where he studied medicine and law. He had no intention of becoming a minister. But he would go on to be a fourth-generation minister. So I would imagine there was some family influence there. But he said the greatest influence of his life in becoming a minister was the president of Morehouse College, Dr. Benjamin Mays. That Dr. Benjamin Mays, the president, saw something in King and took him under his arm and really encouraged him to become a minister. He also said that King helped him realize that Jesus was not only a spiritual teacher and healer, but that he was socially engaged. And he was able to take all of those things into his life's work. So he graduated college at the old age of 18, was ordained as a Baptist minister, and became the co-minister with his father at the Ebenezer Baptist Church. But he didn't stop. He went immediately into seminary, where he said, if I'm going to become a minister, I want to study it. And so he attended a seminary in Boston, and that's where he met his wife, Coretta Scott King, who had been a singer, and she caught his eye. So he married her when he was in Boston. He didn't stop at his master's degree. He went on to get his PhD, studying while married at the time. And again, at the age of 25 years old, he completed his dissertation, was awarded his PhD, and at the age of 25, he took his first church of his own and became the pastor of Dexter Avenue Baptist Church in Montgomery, Alabama. That's a lot for a 25-year-old to take on. I mean, I thought about this week when he became a pastor at 18. Can you imagine going to see an 18-year-old pastor saying, I need help with my marriage life, or anything? And you're like, so he had to earn some respect, and he had to grow up fast, I'm sure, in some ways. So 25 years old, he becomes this minister, has his PhD. And it was less than a year after that. Now, he writes that he had just, as he was starting this new ministry, he'd been there a few months and was starting to get involved, and he had a conversation with his wife, and he made the commitment that he was going to spend time focused on the church and on the family, and he wasn't going to get involved in anything else. And that's when he went out to a meeting and got nominated to be the president of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. He said yes before he said time to say no. He said, if I'd thought about it too much, I may have said no. But he had already adopted something that he believed. If you'll show me this next slide. He had already adopted a belief that said the old law about an eye for an eye just leaves everybody blind. The thing is, the time is, it's always the right time to do the right thing. And he said that night he felt it was the time to do the right thing. I think perhaps he was most nervous about going home and telling his wife he had signed up to do yet another thing. So he did become the first president, and as a matter of fact, he served as president for the Southern Christian Leadership Conference throughout his life. That conference was created to bring ministers together to be grounded in the Golden Rule. He really wanted to work with white ministers. He believed that whites were the best allies for what was going on. I happen to agree in that particular case. And to this day, just an interesting King, they began to work for what they called the Poor People's Campaign. They were working for the equality and betterment of all people. Their motto was, not one hair of one head of one person should ever be harmed. That was the energy about they went out their work. Interestingly enough, do you know who has taken up the helm of the Poor People's Campaign? Is Dr. Barber, a North Carolina native who many say is a lot like Dr. King. If you've ever heard him speak, I agree. And so it was during his role, he was serving as the minister and he's serving as the head of this coalition conference, where he was invited to speak around the United States, but also to go and speak internationally. He writes about being able to go to India for a month. It was during his time with India that he really dug deep into the lessons of Gandhi. Now, I started this series off talking about Gandhi, but Martin Luther King Jr. credits Gandhi as his greatest influence in being able to do what he did. He said, while the Montgomery boycott was going on, India's Gandhi was the guiding light of our techniques of nonviolence and social change. We spoke of him often. And so he stayed in contact with family and with followers and was learning and being guided on how to deal with his own anger and how to constantly show up in that spirit of nonviolence, which at the root of nonviolence is called servodea. It means your soul force. It means that what you believe in so much is so strong that if you use nonviolence, it would be in violation to what you believed in. So you see, nonviolence was not the highest value. The highest value was dignity and peace and respect for all life. And if that's truly your highest value, then you can't be violent. And so that was what he called himself into. In 1963, he would lead the famous March on Washington, where he would give that amazing speech to somewhere between 200,000 and 300,000 people. Did anyone here happen to attend that? I had a woman in my last congregation who was in that meeting, and she was a young African-American woman at the time, and she said the energy was so powerful and his words were so healing that she literally passed out in the crowd, that it was just, she said it was incredible. She had never forgotten it. In 1964, that led to the Civil Rights Act, which is still a work in progress, as we all know. His desire to help create a beloved community and end segregation forced him to find his own voice and stand in his own truth, and to develop inside of himself a capacity for leadership. He said the same way that Gandhi freed India from Britain would be the same way that he would work to free people around him from oppression. So very powerful words that he shared. He was influenced again early in life. He truly had a foundation of love and dignity. And he shared a story. This is his own writing, and to me the story is very telling. He says, from the age of 3, when he was 3 years old, he said, I had a white playmate who was about my age. We always felt free to play our childhood games together. My friend did not live in our community, but he was usually around every day because his father owned a store across the street from our house. At the age of 6, we both entered school, separate schools, of course. I remember how our friendship began to break as soon as we entered school. This was not the desire for either of us. The climax came one day when he told me that his father had demanded that he would play with me no more. I will never forget what a great shock this was to me. I immediately asked my parents about the motives behind such a statement. We were at the dinner table when the situation was discussed, and here for the first time I was made aware of the existence of a race problem. I had never been conscious of it before. Now that says a lot about his parents and the way they were able to love. That at 6 years old, he was never yet aware of a race problem. And all of a sudden, his little friend can't play with him. He said, my mother confronted the age-old problem of the Negro parent in America, how to explain discrimination and segregation to a small child. She taught me that I should feel a sense of somebodyness, but that on the other hand, I had to go out and face a system that stared me in the face every day saying, you are less than, you are not equal to. She told me about slavery and how it ended with the Civil War. She tried to explain the divided system of the South, the segregated schools, the restaurants, theaters, housing, the white and colored signs on drinking fountains, waiting rooms, and lavatories. She described it as a social condition rather than a natural order. She made it clear that she opposed this system and that I must never allow it to make me feel inferior. Then she said the words that almost every Negro hears before he can yet understand the injustice that makes them necessary. My mother said, Martin, you are as good as anyone. At that time, my mother had no idea that the little boy in her arms would years later be involved in a struggle against the very system she was speaking of. Very, very powerful and moving words. And so an awareness about an injustice. And the word injustice here is very important because throughout his life, he had to continually learn and work to direct the anger at the injustice and not the person who may have been acting it out. That's really, really an important takeaway for me. So when I look at his life, I have sort of divided some of these things into three teachings. If you've been around me much, sometimes I hear things and I say, that'll preach. And so I've divided to these things into hopefully three things that'll preach. I'll let you tell me afterwards. But the first thing that he truly demonstrated, I believe, I would call that each of us are called to draw upon a bigger God to create wider circles of love. To continually draw upon a bigger God to create wider circles of love. I remember the story of a little girl in kindergarten during their time of drawing, and she was just drawing away. And the teacher comes over and says, "Tell me about what you're drawing." And she said, "I'm drawing God." And the teacher said, "You can't draw God. Nobody knows what God looks like." And the little girl didn't miss a beat, and she said, "Well, they will when I get through." You know, every day you're asked to draw God and to draw upon a source of something that is your strength. For Martin Luther King Jr., who was a fourth-generation Baptist preacher, his theology was quite different. As a matter of fact, he wrote that, he said, "I had always been the questioning and precocious type. At the age of 13, I shocked my Sunday school class by denying the bodily resurrection of Jesus. Doubts began to spring forth unrelentingly. I did not know this, but in his writing, he did not believe in the virgin birth of Jesus. He did not believe in the resurrection, and he also did not believe that Jesus was the only begotten Son of God. I had no idea, but it's clearly in his writings, and he talks about these things and he defends them. He goes so far as to say that it is a great injustice for us to put Jesus as the exclusive because it makes it impossible for us to live out our calling. I believe that if Martin Luther King Jr. had lived many more years longer, he would have been a lot like Maya Angelou, who you really saw that progression. I think he was very new thought in his ideas, quite frankly. Of course, he would only live to be 39 years old. Just 3 months after he turned 39, he was assassinated for what he stood for and for a lot of his beliefs. But he was always being called to draw the circle wider. When he received, this is a prayer, an excerpt from a prayer that he prayed in his Baptist church on a Palm Sunday. He said, "Dear God, we thank you for the fact that you have inspired men and women in all nations and in all cultures. We call you different names. Some call you Allah, some call you Elohim, some call you Jehovah, some call you Brahman, some call you unmoved mover, but we know that these are all names for the one and same God." It really says a lot about what he believed. He went on to say in the speech he would win the Nobel Peace Prize. He'd be the youngest person at the time in history to win the Nobel Peace Prize. He gave all the money that he won to his cause, just like Mother Teresa did when she won it. He said in that speech, "All I am saying is simply this, that all of life is interrelated. This calls for a worldwide fellowship that lifts neighborly concern beyond one's tribe, race, class, and nation, is a reality call for all of us in an all-embracing and unconditional love for all mankind." He went on to talk about love. He said, "This oft misunderstood and misinterpreted concept has now become an absolute necessity for our survival." He said, "And yet when I speak of love, I'm not speaking of some sentimental or weak response. When I speak of love, I'm not speaking of that force which is just emotional bosh. I am speaking of that force which all of the great religions have seen as the supreme unifying principle of life." He said, we can no longer afford to worship the God of hate or bow before the altar of retaliation. Those are powerful, beautiful words. He said, love is somehow the key that unlocks the door which leads to ultimate reality. This Hindu, Muslim, Christian, Jewish, Buddhist belief about absolute reality is beautifully summed up in the first epistle of St. John. Let us love one another, for love is God. So a beautiful story of how to draw a bigger God and draw upon a bigger God to help us create wider circles of love. He would regularly ask himself, is there anyone that I'm placing outside of the circle of love? Is there anyone I've placed outside of my heart? It reminds me of that story that came out of World War II. During World War II in France, there's a story of 3 young soldiers that fought side by side. It just so happened that the young soldiers, one was Protestant, one was Catholic, and one was Jewish. But in a time of war and fighting together and being in foxholes together, I don't think it much matters what those particular beliefs were. The 3 said they had become like brothers. They loved each other. And on one tragic day, one of them was killed in the line of fire, and it happened to be the young boy that was Jewish. The other 2 friends were heartbroken, and they could not imagine just leaving him there. And so they committed to get up very early the next morning. They remembered seeing a little Catholic church or chapel that had a graveyard. And so early the next morning, they got up and they took the body of their friend, and they went and knocked on the door, and a priest came out, and they said, we want to bury our friend here. And the priest said, absolutely, I'll get you some shovels. And as the priest went and got the shovels and then brought them back, the conversation continued, and the priest then learned that that boy that had passed away was Jewish. And the priest said, I am so sorry, I misunderstood, because he hasn't been confirmed, and if he's not Catholic, he can't be buried in these grounds. He said, I'm so sorry, but he just can't. So they took the shovels and they went out, and just outside of the fence, they buried their friend and then went back. The next day they learned that they would soon be leaving, and so they wanted to make one final trip to give their last regards to their friend. And so again, they got up early the next morning and went over. And as they went and they looked, they could not see their friend. Angry and upset, they ran over to the little church and knocked on the door for the priest to come out, and they said, what have you done with our friend? And the priest said, after you left yesterday, my heart was broken. After watching what you did, I could not sleep last night. He said, my heart was expanded. I got up early this morning and I moved that fence so that your friend is now inside of the cemetery. And isn't that a powerful teaching of how sometimes we need to move some fences? We need to move things out. And so the lesson for me is, where in our hearts have we created circles of love that it's time for them to expand? So to ever create bigger God and bigger circles of love. The second takeaway that I take away from Dr. King is the power of living your values and finding your voice. To have the courage to find your values and live out your values. And to also have the courage to find your voice and to use your voice. He talked about this in a number of his quotes when he said that in the end we will remember not the words of our enemies, but the silence of our friends. One of my colleagues, Reverend Wendy Craig Purcell, wrote, there is no way we're ever going to transform the world with love if people with conscience and people who have committed to draw the circle really wide do not speak up. But if we only do that in our meditation time, or when we're in the company of our tribe or like-minded people. You know, we had a pledge, and part of that pledge was, I will not remain silent when love needs a voice. And so finding our values and living out our values and finding our voice. There's another wonderful leader, a prominent Lutheran pastor in Germany during the time of Hitler. His name is Martin Niemöller. And he wrote what is now called the Bystander's Creed. He wrote, First they came for the communist, and I did not speak up because I was not communist. Then they came for the socialist, and I did not speak out because I was not socialist. Then they came for the trade unionist, and I did not speak out because I was not a trade unionist. Then they came for the Jews, and I did not speak out because I was not a Jew. Then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak out for me. The bystander's credo. So to be willing to use our voice, find the courage to live out our values and to use our voice. Martin Luther King Jr. said, our lives begin to end the day that we become silent about things that matter. And the ultimate measure of a human is not where they stand in moments of comfort and convenience, but where they stand in times of challenge and controversy. So to be rooted and grounded in love as he was, to draw upon a bigger God and to keep drawing our circles of love wider and bigger, and to have the courage to live out your values and to use your voice. The third thing that I believe he really stood for, and again, was all of these things work together. It's not one before the other, but they all truly work together. The third point is the means and the end must be the same. He said the means we use must be as pure as the ends we seek. Peace is not merely a distant goal we seek, but a means by which we arrive. Peace can not only be our destination, but it must also be our journey. Have you ever been working for the right thing and realized you were going about it in the wrong way? Have you ever been to an angry peace march? When my first ministry in 2004, I was invited to go to a peace march. It was the angriest gathering I've ever seen. And I realized that we can't create peace with an angry energy. Now, be very clear, what I am not saying is that we shouldn't get angry, because that's not real. Anger is a useful, necessary energy. Anger moves us into action. Anger fires us up to get out of dangerous situation. Anger is a part of who we are. It's part of our passion. However, if we use our anger and just direct it toward one person or one institution, we've allowed our anger to make us more narrow and small. That our anger should always be used to uproot the injustice, and that how we go about it is the key to accomplishing it. I believe that's what the scriptures meant when it said, much tribulation worketh patience. Patience brings forth patience. Love generates love. Peace generates peace. And it's a lifetime practice to be in relationship with that anger and those feelings and to use them to continually bring you back to love. So often we want a quick fix. You know, in spiritual circles, and especially in New Thought circles, sometimes I witness a lot of what I call magical thinking or spiritual bypass. That if I could just have enough affirmations, the whole world will be nice and good. If I could just think this way, just only think this way, Lord forbid I have to change or do anything, but if I could just think this way and pray this way enough. And it's called magical thinking, because the way to something is to start being and doing that something. That's what Jesus taught. But it makes me think about the story of the magical elevator. It was a story about a man who was aging in years, and he had been quite ornery and mean in his time, and he had some ways that weren't very healthy, and he was his health was failing. And his son finally convinced him to go see a doctor for the first time in his life. So he got his father. They go into the big city. He's sitting in the waiting room of this tall building. And this man, for the first time in his life, is sitting there waiting to see a doctor, and he sees an elevator. He's never seen one before. And he happens to notice this older man standing in front of this silver door that opens, and the man steps in. The doors close. And then he noticed the doors open again, and out steps a young man. He keeps watching. He's really got his attention now. And he sees this woman with a walker walk up to that elevator. And he watches, and the doors open, and that woman gets on, and the doors close. And then when the doors open, this young, beautiful woman walked out. And he says, he was sitting there, and he says, son, if you just help me get in that box, everything will be all right. And sometimes that's kind of how we are. It's like, well, if I could just make it to this place, or if I could just do this or just do that, everything would be all right. Well, Let the means and the end be the same. Let the means we use be as pure as the ends we seek. Peace is not merely a distant goal, but a means by which we arrive at that goal. Whatever we're working toward, we must use the very energy to accomplish that which we're seeking to bring about. I'm going to invite Richard and Kat to come up to help me make a final point. And while they're doing that, I want to tell you another shared story that Martin Luther King shared that helped shape his life. He said, when I was 14 years old, I traveled from Atlanta to Dublin, Georgia, with a dear teacher of mine, Miss Bradley. I participated in a speaking contest as a 14-year-old, and I succeeded in winning the contest. My subject, ironically enough, was the Negro and the Constitution. He said that night, Miss Bradley and I were so excited as we climbed aboard the bus returning to Atlanta. Along the way, some white passengers boarded the bus, and the white driver ordered us to get up and give the whites our seat. We didn't move quickly enough to suit them, so the driver began cursing at us. I intended to stay right in my seat, but Miss Bradley urged me up, saying we had to obey the law. We stood up in the aisle for 90 miles to Atlanta. That night will never leave my memory. It was the angriest I have ever been in my life. Martin Luther King Jr. wrote openly about grappling with the easy way out of hating. And that's why he said, I will never stoop so low to hate a person. Because he chose to wrestle with those things that he could live out the love that he was. And he became a beautiful example later in his life, and I would add again his very young life of 39 years. He told a story of having something again that upset him with a man spit on him. And a song has been written about this, and I've asked Kat to sing it so you can see how Martin Luther King responded.
I once heard a powerful story about a man who stood in his truth with such conviction in who he was. He would not be moved. Someone stepped out of the crowd and said, "Are you Martin Luther King?" He said, "Yes, I am," and the well-dressed man spit on him. King took out his handkerchief and wiped the hate from his suit. He gave it back to the man and said, "I believe this belongs to you. I will lift you up and do what I can do. I see your heart and I know your pain. I have been there too. I will hold you high while you do what you have to do. I am clear who is standing here with you. I believe this belongs to you."
He found a way to be fully present, to know what belonged to him and what didn't, and to never be disrespectful. And so again, we take away the willingness to continually draw a bigger God and to draw upon the bigness of our God, that we may create wider circles of love within and without, that we may have the courage to find our values and live out our values, to have the courage to find our voice and to use our voice. And finally, to always remember that the means and the end must be the same. That the way to peace is peace. The way of love is love. To live it out. So I invite you to close your eyes. In the words of that beautiful song, I will lift you up. We began by pausing to give thanks for this life, this man who was willing to grapple with the challenges of life, who was willing to lean into those things that caught his attention, who was willing to notice what stirred him to anger, the things that were passionate for him, and to continually hold himself accountable to be the light of the world, to be the expression of God in love and action. So we give thanks for one who has demonstrated this. And then we turn within and notice the feelings that we feel. What does it feel like today when the truth about racial inequality comes up? And how are we helping to draw circles of love where all beings are seen equally as the light of God and are treated with dignity? We use it to consider, do we allow our understanding of God to continually expand? For if God is infinite, then we must ever be expanding in our understanding of what it is to know and experience that which we call God, the all that is. And can we point to and name what we value? And are we willing to live those out and to use our voice? Every day to remind ourselves that the way to peace is peace. The way of love is love. The way of right relationship, of beauty, of abundance, of whatever we're seeking to experience. To do the next right thing along that path. I will do the next right thing. The time is always right to do the right thing. In this space, we also bring into our awareness those that we are holding in prayer and those situations for which and about which we are praying. I invite you now to speak those into this sacred space. And to speak your own name. And to remember that it is love. That love is the overcoming power. That through love we will overcome. And so in that spirit of love, we say, thank you, God. And I invite you to gently open your eyes and to smile. That lifts your spirit. And I promise you it lifts mine when I see all of you smiling back at me. And when you're ready, I invite you to stand and sing this song together.
we shall overcome. We shall overcome. We shall overcome someday. Oh, deep in my heart, I do believe that we shall overcome someday.
We'll walk hand in hand.
We'll walk hand in hand. We'll walk hand in hand. We'll walk hand in hand someday. Oh, now deep in my heart, I do believe we walk hand in hand someday.
Sing it out one more time. We'll walk hand in hand.
We'll walk hand in hand. We'll walk hand in hand. We'll walk hand in hand someday. Oh, deep in my heart, I do believe we'll walk hand in hand someday. We'll walk hand in hand
This day.
this day.
How many of you are ready to walk hand in hand with every brother and sister on the face of this earth?
Yeah.
And all God's children said, this is awesome. Thank you.
Oh, there you are. Thank you, Rev Darlene, for this powerful series that you're doing for us and reminding us of people that we admire, but also people that we are called to be. Now, so with that in mind, we come to our time of offering. And so I invite you to think about not just what you're offering financially today, but all the things that we offer in our lives, the ways that we offer ourselves to this world, the way that we offer ourselves to this community, and where we put our energy and our intention. So I invite the ushers to come forward as we say together this blessing. Divine love flowing through me blesses and multiplies all that I have, all that I give, all that I receive, and all that I am. I am now in perfect balance and flow with the universal tides and receiving. Thank you, God. And so it is.
Somebody told me of the joy that they had, and then they told me that in sorrow they could be glad. you, and you, and you, and you, especially you. I didn't think it could be. No, I didn't think it could be. No, I didn't think it was true until it happened to me. Yeah, yeah,
And once again, thank you to this amazing music team and to Kat for her vocal leadership. As our ushers come forward, and Diane Swift, one of our prayer chaplains, and Madeline Parker, who is the director of our volunteer program, we're reminded that there are many ways that we give, and that this community gives to each other through all of these ways. And there's a prayer box that stays at the back of the chapel that you can put your prayer concerns in, and we hold them. Our prayer chaplain team and our ministerial team holds those in confidence for you. And there are also prayer chaplains that will be out in our prayer chapel to offer prayers with you after the service if you wish. And so, Diane, if you would offer our blessing.
I can hardly speak. This is so beautiful, and I am so grateful for this Unity Church. So we all give thanks for these beautiful offerings which enable Unity to do its gorgeous work. I can't say more.
Amen. Let's all stand and join hands once more in singing ourselves out in the peace we want to see in the world.